Before a baby can see your face clearly, before they understand a single word you say, they already know you. Not your name, not your face, your voice. And what they do with it, deep inside their developing mind, will completely change how you see the bond between a parent and a child. This isn't a feel-good story. This is neuroscience. And once you understand it, you will never speak near a baby the same way again. Here's the thing most people never think about. The moment a baby is born, they enter a world they have absolutely no framework for. No language, no memory, no understanding of gravity, color, pain, or love. They are, in every literal sense, starting from zero. But there is one single thing that isn't new to them. One thing that traveled through water and tissue and bone for 9 months before they ever took their first breath. Your voice. And what that voice does to the infant brain, how it reorganizes neural pathways, triggers ancient survival responses, and literally sculpts who this child will become, is something scientists are only now beginning to fully understand. And it is nothing short of extraordinary. For a long time, the popular belief was simple. Babies are basically passive receivers, little blank slates. You talk to them, they listen. Maybe they feel comfort. Maybe they feel calm. But they're not really doing anything with it. Not yet. Their brains are too undeveloped, the thinking went, too unformed, too new. We used to imagine the newborn mind as something like a camera before the film is loaded, present, open, but not yet capturing anything real. This idea stuck around for decades. It shaped how hospitals handled newborns. It influenced how parents were told to interact with their babies. And it felt logical. After all, how much can a brain the size of a fist really be processing? As it turns out, almost everything. The blank slate theory is not just incomplete. In the most important ways, it is flat out wrong. In 2013, researchers at the University of Montreal conducted a study that would quietly reshape our entire understanding of infant cognition. They monitored newborns, some just hours old, using functional near-infrared spectroscopy, a non-invasive brain scan that maps activity in real time. They played recordings, the mother's voice, a stranger's voice, silence. What they found surprised everyone in the room. When the mother spoke, the left hemisphere of the baby's brain, the region associated with language processing and speech, lit up with a kind of intensity they hadn't expected. Not in a vague, generalized way, in a targeted, organized way, as if the brain wasn't hearing something new, as if it was recognizing something it had been waiting for. The stranger's voice triggered a completely different response, the right hemisphere, more associated with emotional processing of unfamiliar stimuli, more guarded, more alert. The baby's brain, in other words, already had a category for its mother's voice, a dedicated neural address, built entirely in the womb. Before the baby ever saw the world, the brain had already mapped the most important sound in it. Harvard's Center on the Developing Child later described this period, from the 3rd trimester through the 1st year of life, as the most intensive period of auditory neural construction in a human being's entire existence. The sounds a baby hears during this window don't just entertain them, they become the architecture of the brain itself. But here's the part that most people never hear about, the part that changes everything. It's not just that babies recognize your voice, it's what they do with it. When a familiar caregiver's voice enters the infant's auditory field, something extraordinary cascades through the nervous system. Cortisol, the stress hormone, drops. Heart rate stabilizes. Oxygen levels in the prefrontal cortex actually increase. The baby is not just hearing you. The baby is using you. Your voice is functioning, biologically, as a regulator. As an external nervous system, a surrogate for emotional stability that the baby's own brain doesn't yet have the wiring to provide. You are not just talking to a baby. You are literally being their brain. Scientists call this co-regulation. And it is not a metaphor. It is a measurable, physiological process. The infant's internal world, their heartbeat, their hormone levels, their sense of safety, is being synchronized to the rhythm and tone of your voice. Every time you speak, you are doing biological work inside another human being's body. And here's the part nobody talks about. The quality of that voice matters. Not the words. The tone. The warmth. The rhythm. Babies are not listening to what you say. They're reading the emotional frequency underneath it. Like a tuning fork held to the body,
They feel the vibration before they understand the song.
But here's where it gets even stranger, because the voice doesn't just regulate, it predicts. And what it predicts will make you reconsider how language, and maybe even personality, is actually formed. Picture a laboratory at MIT. The year is 2018. A team of developmental neuroscientists has recruited 47 mothers and their infants, all between 4 and 6 months old. The experiment seems almost cruelly simple. The mother sits behind a screen. She is told to speak to her baby normally for 2 minutes. Then, fall silent. Say nothing. Keep her face neutral. This is called the still face paradigm. And if you've ever seen footage of it, it is genuinely difficult to watch. The moment the mother's voice stops, the baby notices. Not after a few seconds, immediately. Within moments, the baby begins to reach, to vocalize, to make the sounds they've learned produce a response. Their body leans forward, their face cycles through confusion, then urgency, then something that looks heartbreakingly close to grief. The babies weren't just missing comfort, they were missing regulation. They were missing the external input their nervous system had come to rely on as baseline reality. Now here's what the MIT researchers were actually measuring. Using EEG sensors placed on the infant's scalp, they tracked brainwave activity in real time. And what they found during the silence was not calm, it was chaos. Neural activity became erratic, stress markers spiked. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain associated with learning, attention, and emotional processing, essentially went offline. The absence of the familiar voice wasn't neutral. It was, to the infant brain, an emergency. When the mother began speaking again, the recovery was almost instant, within seconds, as if a switch had been thrown. The chaos resolved, the brain reorganized, the baby exhaled. Not because the words changed anything, because the voice returned, and with it, the baby's entire sense of reality. Now I want you to stop for a second and think about this from a different angle, because this isn't just a story about babies. This is a story about you, about where you came from, about how you were built. You were once that infant. You were once that brain in a body that had no tools, no language, no way to make sense of the overwhelming flood of sensation the world throws at a newborn. And what saved you, what kept your nervous system from collapsing into permanent chaos, was a voice. Someone's voice, heard first through amniotic fluid, then through cold hospital air, then again and again, thousands of times, in rooms you no longer remember. That voice became your first template for what safety feels like, for what closeness feels like, for what love sounds like before you had a word for love. And here's the part that might genuinely unsettle you. Some of those patterns, those emotional frequencies you absorbed as an infant, are still running inside you right now. Researchers studying attachment theory have found that the way infants respond to vocal tone in their first year of life correlates strongly with how adults regulate emotion under stress decades later. The nervous system remembers, even when the conscious mind has no access to the memory. You are not just observing this, you are made of it. And it goes deeper still, because the voice doesn't just regulate the infant's present, it builds their future. Studies from Stanford's Language and Cognition Lab have shown that babies who are spoken to more, not read to, not had music played for them, but directly spoken to in conversation, develop measurably larger vocabularies by age 2, higher verbal IQ at age 5, stronger executive function throughout childhood. But here's the fascinating wrinkle. It's not just about quantity, it's about something scientists call conversational turns. The back and forth. When a baby makes a sound, any sound, and the caregiver responds directly to it, something clicks in the infant brain. A circuit closes. The brain learns, my sounds have power. My voice changes the world around me. This is not just the beginning of language. This is the beginning of agency, of identity, of the belief that one exists as a self that matters. The first time you answer a baby's babble, you are teaching them that they are real. Think about the weight of that for a moment, not the weight of a grand gesture, not the weight of education or achievement, just the simple act of turning toward a child who made a sound and answering. In that tiny exchange lives the seed of everything: confidence, curiosity, the willingness to speak, to reach, to try. It all starts there.
in a conversation that isn't even a conversation yet.
But there's a shadow side to all of this, and it's one that's becoming increasingly urgent in a world where screens are everywhere and adult attention is increasingly fractured. Because if the familiar voice is a biological regulator, if babies are wired to sync their nervous systems to the voices around them, then what happens when those voices go quiet? What happens when the caregiver is physically present but verbally absent? Staring at a phone, lost in a task, emotionally elsewhere? Researchers call this the problem of present but not available, and the data coming in is troubling. Babies in environments where adult speech is replaced heavily by background television, or where caregivers are frequently distracted and unresponsive, show measurably slower neural development in the language regions of the brain, not because they were neglected in the traditional sense, but because the voice wasn't there often enough in the way it needed to be. The brain expected a conversation and got silence wearing the mask of presence. This isn't about guilt, it's about awareness. Because awareness is where change begins, and the change required is almost shockingly simple. Talk. Just talk. Narrate the mundane. Describe what you're cooking. Name the dog. Say what you see. It doesn't need to be profound. It doesn't need to be stimulating. The baby isn't evaluating your content. They are bathing in your frequency. And that frequency, offered consistently, generously, and with warmth, builds a brain, builds a self, builds a life. We spend so much time thinking about what we give children, the toys, the schools, the opportunities, the memories. But long before any of that, before the first birthday, before the first word, before the first memory that will stick, something far more fundamental is happening. A brain is being built, synapse by synapse, conversation by conversation, voice by voice. And the builder isn't a teacher. Isn't a curriculum, isn't a screen or a system or a philosophy of parenting. It's you, your voice, the one they already knew before they knew anything else. The most powerful gift you can give a child isn't found in a store. It doesn't require money or planning or expertise. It was always there, in your throat, in your breath, in the quiet way you say their name across a room. You were always the miracle. You just didn't know it. Now here's what I want you to sit with. If your earliest experiences of voice shaped your nervous system, your sense of safety, your emotional baseline, what does that mean for the traumas that were also carried in voices? The shouting, the coldness, the silence that answered a child's reach with nothing at all. Because there's an entire field of science dedicated to exactly that question. To the way early vocal environments don't just build brains, but can wound them, and to whether those wounds can be healed. How, and when it's too late, and when it absolutely isn't. That's the next video, and I think it might be the most important one I've made. But before you go, I want to know something. Do you remember a voice from your childhood? One that made you feel safe? Drop it in the comments. Just one sentence. You might be surprised what comes up. See you in the next one.